Hello, Internet Magic Man here from MMOBomb.com, bringing you another first look video. This time, it's for Tarisland, the free-to-play MMORPG, available on PC and mobile devices, brought to you by Level Infinite and Tencent, one of the richest gaming companies in the world that scrimped and saved in any regards they possibly could when it comes to this game. We're going to spend 15 minutes or so checking the game out, giving you our first impressions of things. Obviously, this is not an in-depth guide to anything, but giving you a feel, a flavor, if you will, for Tarisland. And forgive me if I happen to call it Tarisland through here, too. I've been calling it Tarisland for months until we finally got a trailer where some voice acting, maybe AI, I'm not sure. We'll get to that in a minute. Pronounced it Tarisland. So I'll do my best to use their pronunciation throughout the entire video. Let's kick it off with character creation. When you get into Tarisland, you're going to notice that you have 9 classes to choose from, 7 of which are gender-locked. Now, previously, all 9 of these classes were initially announced as being gender-locked when the game was very, very early in its kind of hype phase and releasing information phase. That didn't sit well with the MMORPG community for obvious reasons. So Level Infinite and Tencent went back to the drawing board and said, okay, we're going to start making options, gender options for all the classes. However, by the time of launch, only Paladin and Mage have received their other genders. The other 7 classes are gender locked. You'll be able to pick from one of these 9 classes. Now, I don't want to say they all play the same. They definitely have differences, particularly when you start getting into the skills stuff a little later in the game as you're working your way through the trivial main story. But there's a same kind of overall feel to them. You'll get a couple abilities that build up some resource, a couple abilities that pay off that resource, an AoE to do some damage to a group of mobs, and then obviously some healing spells are worked in there for some of the classes that can serve as either a DPS or a healer, depending on what spec you end up deciding to go with, and then they'll all get this ultimate. So all the classes kind of feel similar to start with in that you'll build with a couple abilities, pay off, build, pay off, build, pay off, ultimate. And you'll kind of follow that same cycle. Now, there is a little more diversity than that when you start getting a little further into the game and you pick a particular spec or a particular talent, or you start putting skill points into the trees. And there's some flexibility there also with your magic stone that can give you buffs and stats increases as well that you'll be leveling up along the way. So it does vary, but they all have that kind of base feel. Build up a resource, spend a resource, AoE when there's a bunch of stuff there, pay off with your ultimates. Now, if you're looking for some just outright DPS, I'll give you a little suggestion right now if you want to just jump in early and be doing pretty decent DPS. When you're talking about ranged, Ranger and Bard seem to be relatively good right now, particularly on the PvE front. It's kind of funny, Bard's abilities have a little bit of a support structure in there, but they can do some really good damage. Ranger does really good damage. Swordsman does some very good damage in up close in melee range. But if you're looking for maybe ease of rotation and DPS, maybe check out the Bard. Not to say that it's simplistic, but it may be a little easier to catch on, particularly at the beginning, and then build on that rotation as you go. Now, customization of the character, there is nothing to write home about here. A couple of heads to choose from, a couple of hair tones to choose from, hair colors to choose from as well. If you are a person of color and you want your character to be a person of color, sorry, get bent. The best you're going to be able to give them is a little bit of a dark tan. There's like no options in character creation at all. And in fact, this is one of those games where every single piece of armor you put on doesn't matter. What your character looks like at the character creation screen is what your character is going to look like until one of 2 things happens. One, you get pretty decently leveled in the game and you create a very specific gear set. It actually gives you a preview of that gear set on the character creation screen. That will change your appearance at that point. And then if you get cosmetic skins, putting on a new chest piece does not change the way your character looks at all. You have to get those skins either through gameplay or, more likely, through the gacha pools. More on that when we get to the cash shop. After you've spent about 5 total minutes in character creation, you will jump into the game, and you are going to realize right off the bat that Tencent skimped incredibly here when it comes to localization. I'm sure I'm not the first person to say that, nor will I be the last person to say that. Not only are the subtitles and text translations just terrible, but the voice acting, if it's actually voice acted, I'm not entirely convinced it is. I think there might be some AI in here. I'll explain why in just a second. It's just awful. The localization is laughable at best and eye-rolling at its worst. Just reading some of the subtitles here in some of the cutscenes that are showing, I'm sure you'll get a flavor for that. And the story is whatever. About 10 quests in, you will literally start skipping it. By the time we hit the second zone and I had already seen 2 character betrayals, it's laughable. It's absolutely laughable. So don't play Tarisland if you're looking for an MMORPG to give you a good story. You aren't getting it here, and the dialogue and voice acting, if it's voice acted, is pretty damn bad. That said, they not only did they skimp on the localization, there's also some programming skimping going on here. I noticed in one cutscene, although I had rolled a female mage, the voice actor or AI reading the script referred to me as he. And I said, okay, that's a little weird. In the very next line, somebody else referred to me as he, and the subtitle said he/she. So it was very lazy both in the script that was read and in the subtitles. And I thought initially maybe that was tied to when the classes were gender locked, that the dialogue ran a lookup against the class rather than the gender you had picked for your character, because gender wasn't originally supposed to be an option. And so I went back, even though I rolled a female mage, which was the original default mage before male was added before launch, I went back and I grabbed a class that could only be female, and I brought that class back in, leveled it to this cutscene, and here's what happened.
Your visit to the on-cache.
Mission of memories.
Retrieve memories.
He lost his memories. All he has is a strange stone to go on. An experienced guide is needed on every adventure. That's our connection.
Despite the loss of memory, he is well trained.
So yeah, the game is definitely skimping and saving where it can. Once you get into the game, what are you actually going to be doing though? Let's dive in and take a look first at some PvE. PvE is where Tarisland's a bit of a mixed bag. There is some good here, but there's an awful lot of bad too. We've already mentioned the story, so I'm not going to belabor that point. You're going to be skipping cutscenes and dialogue wherever you can, probably about half an hour in, if you make it that long. You're going to roam from zone to zone, doing your quests, doing your side quests, leveling up. Now, early on here, there is some time gating going on in that process. Now, that may not be a factor by the time you decide to jump into Tarisland, but you can only reach certain levels on certain days, with new dungeons, new raids, and new levels unlocking each day through a time gating process. After we get about a week or so in, you probably won't have to butt up against that. But if you're jumping in early, yes, you absolutely will bump up against that. In the world, quests are standard. Talk to a quest giver, got an exclamation point, go kill 17 rats, come on back. Talk to him, get a reward, get some experience, and level up. Now, each zone does have a reputation meter going on there, so you don't gain renown or reputation with, say, a faction, like you might be familiar with in other MMOs. You're gaining it in the zone. So by doing events in that zone, there are public events, reputation events they call them, in the different zones that you can do, in addition to actually just doing the main story quests or the side quests that are offered in that zone to gain reputation, fill up meters for the reputation rewards, and be able to buy things from their reputation stores. And that applies to all of your zones. And that actually applies to a lot more in Tarisland as well. There are a ton of meters that are going to get you notifications. It's a mobile MMORPG through and through that just happens to be playable on the PC. Whether that be the Battle Pass, we'll talk more about that in monetization, whether that be the reputation grinds, whether that be any of the other functions in the game, there is a meter and usually a currency for just about everything. So when you find rewards you want, there's going to be a particular place and a particular thing you should do to get a particular currency or a particular reputation grind and be able to get those rewards. So be ready to be hitting those red dots an awful lot on a million different menus. It is absolutely one of those MMORPGs. When you get to the more standard PvE fare, your dungeons, your raids, Tarisland actually does kind of a decent job here. Now, initially, the dungeons are extremely easy, right? There might be a few mechanics in there as far as the bosses go, but they're not going to challenge you, even if you get a group that is total strangers and you're not even communicating on any comms in-game or out of the game. None of that matters. Now, when you start to advance a little more, those dungeons start offering more difficulty options. And they also offer various trials. There are solo trials in the game where you can complete boss fights or sequences of levels, where you can also modify the difficulty by giving various buffs to the boss or various debuffs to you. So there's quite a bit of fare when it comes to the PvE dungeon or trial type content, and they can get very challenging and exciting to do. That doesn't always mean that the challenge is fun, though. In some of those dungeons, when you increase the difficulty and go in with a party, maybe you're running the elite or the even the higher ones if you are reaching max level, sometimes it's just an HP increase and the fights become tedious instead of challenging. So it is a bit of a mixed bag, but mechanically the dungeons are sound, even if the UI looks like a very old Elv UI version and the frames are, not really to my liking, but whatever. It is what it is on that front. And they kind of get you ready for that early in Tarisland. Very early in your kind of initial tutorial, you have basically a 10-player raid fight. Now, your 9 teammates are all AI, but they even do a party check. So the game does kind of a neat job, not a thorough job, but kind of a neat job in its tutorial and kind of getting you acclimated to group play. So when you get to those dungeons, those raids, those trials, you're doing public events, you're doing public world bosses, that can be somewhat exciting for somebody that likes dungeon diving like myself. Raids follow that same formula, 10-person variety. They just started opening up today, and we are seeing some challenge out of the higher difficulties for all of that content as well. Can be very interesting there. Nothing groundbreaking or earth-shattering, nothing new if you're a longtime MMO player. It's a tab target MMO through and through, but fun. And then we get to PvP. PvP is a weird bag in Tarisland, man. You got the battlegrounds, which you can go and capture control points, right? That type of gameplay. And then you've got the arena as well. Now, in Battlegrounds, there's this really weird system where you actually gain buffs and strength through doing PvP that carries over. It's not a leveling system, but it does give you buffs and enhancements to your character in PvP. Now, those buffs and enhancements are only used in the Battlegrounds. You can't do them in the rated arenas or anything like that, where it's pretty much just your skill and get in there and do your thing. But the biggest factor here is that the PvP is time locked. And by that, I mean, you really need to look at Tarisland's calendar and timing in your local area if you want a PvP, because the PvP portion is only open during certain hours of the day. So late night here, Central U.S. time, if you're going midnight, 1 a.m. or whatever, you may not be able to even queue for PvP. Now, there's a bunch of reasons and speculation for this. Tarisland obviously is not the first game to do this. A lot of Eastern games, particularly coming out of China, do this kind of thing. And I've seen, some people speculate that it's regulations in China that may play into this, and other factors like not wanting or wanting to isolate the times so that people that want a PvP, there's always an audience that will be there to PvP rather than spreading out this audience, or not letting people get too ranked up above others, and so there's no God mode running around in PvP. It's not exactly well balanced. There's challenges with certain classes in PvP, and this time lock just really doesn't help. Now, whether or not this is something Level Infinite or Tencent will change, I doubt it. There are other games, Chinese MMOs that do this, and they have not changed it. But, if there's enough money, I'm sure somebody somewhere will be willing to do something about it. We'll see. But definitely that's something you should know if you play into PvP. Let's take a minute to talk about the performance of the game itself. Now, this is one that might be hit or miss for you. I personally haven't had any problems logging in or playing to the game. There was one instance where I was logging in and I kind of got disconnected from the server, and so it spun for a minute to try and reconnect, and it did that maybe 2 or 3 times over the course of a couple of minutes, and then it was fine. That was it. That was the only tech issue I had. But there are people that have reported many, many other tech performance issues. That's not to say the game runs like butter. It's a little janky in some areas. Some movement and animations are very clippy. There is no controller support. So if you are WASD moving, there's some odd animations, particularly when you're mounted. It's not as fluid as it really could be. Again, feels like an area where maybe they skimped a little bit on saving some cash in the development process. And then you have other odds and ends in the performance spectrum of Tarisland here. One, you have very few graphical options. VSync, forget about it, brother. This is a mobile game through and through, and your options graphically to run it on the PC are basically the limitations of a cell phone. You do not have a lot of options to go through to try to increase graphical fidelity or performance of the game. As I mentioned, there is no controller support for the game as well, and the camera is that click and hold to move, but it doesn't function exactly right. The camera as a whole in Tarisland always kind of felt like it was fighting me. It is one of those tab target games where if you're using an ability, your character always turns to face, and that can cause a little bit of issues if you are running into raids and trying to keep out of things and using an ability while strafing left or right, and then all of a sudden your character does this lurch forward. You can't use the controller. And then there's the camera itself. While you can press and hold on your mouse to scroll left and right, and it does that just fine, if you go up and down, you're limited by your window size. You can't just keep pulling the mouse down even though the cursor has reached the bottom of the screen. If you push and hold and move your cursor to the right, your camera will just keep spinning even if your mouse goes beyond the frame of the window if you were playing in windowed mode, or is right up against the frame of the window if you have a border on there. But on the up and down axis, there is always a stop point at the top and bottom of the screen. So if you press and hold your mouse and move your mouse up to angle your camera, you can only angle it as far as your mouse until it hits the top of the screen. Then you have to release, drag your cursor back down, press and hold and drag up to continue angling your camera. It is a bit of a constant fight. Then on other tech performance as well, and again, we come back to kind of the voice acting here, maybe being AI, the game is going to be very vocal with you about what is going on in raids and dungeons, whether there is a phase change, they call it a stage change, or if there are certain mechanics you should watch out for or group up together or whatever. The game will actually call them out for you, and there is no option to turn that on or off. So more experienced MMO players may become a little annoyed with the fact that everything already has a call-out built into the game. There is no, I'm going to go learn this for the first time blind. You can read a little guide at the beginning, and it's going to call it out. And this is another area where I noticed the voice acting, because one of the call-outs was for everybody to group up and soak the damage. And in the text displayed on the screen, it displayed damage as just capital D, capital M, capital G. And the voice call out, rather than saying damage, it literally said DMG. So yeah, soak the DMG. So yeah, maybe not the best. Tech-wise, it's got its ups and downs. It's got its flaws. Finally, let's take a look at the cash shop. And if you are asking, is it in the cash shop? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. There is basically every monetization ability that you can have in a free-to-play MMO in Tarisland. Does that make it pay to win? I don't know. We're going to get to that in a second. But reviewing what's here, you do have your gacha pools for your cosmetic skins. If you want your character to look different, this is most likely the place you're going to do it. Now, you can just buy a few other ones in the cash shop as well, and I think there are some that you can actually get in-game, but not, obviously, the better-looking ones are going to be in the cash shop or the gacha pools. And then we've got a battle pass as well, so you can buy the battle pass to get increased rewards. Then there's just a general cash shop. Then it's got the good old currency conversion. Buy this currency and you can sell it to players in-game for in-game gold. And that kind of relates to the crafting system, which I know is a big gripe for a lot of people, the gathering and crafting, because you pick a profession, you go gather, but there's a stamina system based on gather, or locked on gathering, so that you can only gather certain amounts for certain times. And then the crafting system, as you level that up, you do find out that whatever profession you picked is going to be at some point reliant on getting materials from other professions. And you can't trade with other players. So that means you have to use the market board for most of these transactions, finding the materials that you need that you can't make because you didn't pick that profession. You picked something else. But you do need these materials. Now, that's good in one regard, in that all the professions now get enticed to work together, and guilds and big groups of friends are going to have a benefit and an advantage there. But if you're more of a solo player by yourself, once you've picked a profession, to level that up, you're going to have to deal with the gathering stamina, and you're going to have to actually buy materials from other players via the market board. And you can change currencies. You can cash shop into gold. So yeah, there's the servers are pretty flush with gold right now, lots of new players and all that jazz. That'll obviously taper off as leveling and picking up chests and stuff like that starts to taper off. So don't expect gold to be as prevalent and available as it is right now, which means somebody's going to have these materials, right? And so yeah, if you are farming materials and putting them on the auction house, you may be good now, but how long that goes, you have to have a robust game player base and economy to stay with that kind of loop, so that it doesn't turn into just the people that are willing to shell out cash to get the cash shop currency and then sell that to somebody that has gold so they can buy to the marketplace and buy these materials. It could get a little janky. The cash shop doesn't have any egregious pay-to-win item that you look at it and you just, oh my gosh, this is absolutely broken. But it is one of those games that highly encourages the use in many, many subtle ways, whether that be glamour or the crafting system or other stuff, to spend. And here's the kicker, for me at least. It's not account bound. Again, this isn't something exclusive to Tarisland. There's a very popular Western mobile game that does this as well. But even the battle pass is character bound. Nothing is shared between your characters. So there's no way to get another character and give them a different profession, right? You can, but you can't swap the materials between your characters. Nothing is account bound. Everything is character bound, including those cash shop purchases, which is a little grimy in my opinion. Again, there's a lot of feedback on that. Maybe it'll change. Tarisland keeps thanking everybody for the feedback and says maybe we'll consider a change here and there. I don't want to lock them in on this video saying that they've committed to anything here. Maybe it'll change. Maybe it won't. When you get right down to it, is Tarisland worth playing? If you play an MMO already on PC and that is your MMO, no. It just isn't, in my opinion. I'm sorry. I wanted to really, really like this because I'm a huge fan of dungeons and raids, and that is something that Tarisland does fairly well. Could there be improvements? Absolutely, but it does it fairly well. So I wanted to like it for that aspect. Now, if you don't have a main MMO on PC, maybe it's worth giving this free-to-play title a shot. Or if your MMO is on the cusp of an expansion or on a downside right now, you know, we don't have WoW's expansion till the end of August. Dawn Trail for 14 comes this week, so that's unlikely to entice you. But if you are waiting for something and you just want something that's maybe going to knock a few weeks off your calendar, this could be that, but you aren't going to stick here. I just don't see the diehard MMO fans here in the West particularly sticking with Tarisland very long. On the mobile side of things, I might be inclined to rate it a little higher. As far as mobile MMOs go, Tarisland isn't a terrible one. The cash up stuff is still ick to me, and not having things not be account bound is still ick to me. But again, that dungeon diving and that raiding content and being able to do it on mobile, and the performance on mobile, again, might vary for you, but was pretty solid for me, except in PvP. It was awful on mobile, but maybe that's just my experience and you'll have a better one. I might be more inclined to recommend it on mobile for something to do while you're out and about, half-hour bus ride here and there or whatever. But if you're looking for something on on the PC side of things, if you already have an MMO, this ain't pulling you away, except maybe as a couple of weeks of distraction. It's not terrible. It has its flaws. It does some things kind of well, but nothing exceptionally well to the point that, hey, you know what? I don't like Final Fantasy's dungeons, but I love the story. You ain't getting that here. I love Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft's dungeons. I don't care about story. Well, those games do dungeons better. You've just got so many options on the PC in Guild Wars 2, Final Fantasy 14, World of Warcraft, hell, even Elder Scrolls Online and their 10th anniversary this year, giving a bunch of DLC away. In fact, right now, by the way, you can grab the Clockwork City DLC free starting in January for their login bonus. You just have to log in 2 days. So that's pretty easy to get. There's just too many options that are better on PC. I don't know if I want to put New World in there right now. I'm kind of angry at them, but maybe that's just me. I probably wouldn't play Tarisland anymore. I'm going to uninstall it on PC, but I might actually keep it on my phone. I'm not sure yet. Let me know what you think about the game in the comments below. Until next time, gang, love you all. This is Magic Man from MMOBomb.com saying stay safe. We'll see you on the servers.